I sat at the brunch table, my hands folded neatly in my lap, a single scratch-off ticket resting beside my untouched mimosa. Across from me, my daughter beamed as she recounted the surprise cruise she'd gifted her mother-in-law. Not me. Never me. The laughter swirled around the table like perfume I couldn't quite afford to wear. I smiled politely, the way invisible women do, and said thank you. For the ticket. For the reminder. Simple gifts for a simple soul, she'd called it. But even silence has weight. And mine was starting to tip. We're about to begin. But if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The dining room gleamed like it was staged for a real estate shoot. White roses in a crystal vase. Mimosa flutes arranged in perfect symmetry. Brittany had even bought new tableware, monogrammed with a B, as if the family needed reminding who ran the show. Carolyn sat at the far end of the table, one chair away from the kids' fold-out table. She smoothed the front of her soft blue cardigan, a Mother's Day pin from a student still clipped to her collar. It clashed wildly with Brittany's gold-accented aesthetic, but no one mentioned it. "Mom, you have to open it now," Brittany gushed, handing Deborah a long, silver-foiled box tied with a red satin ribbon. Her smile was blinding, almost pageant-like. Deborah, loud in leopard print and costume jewelry, shrieked as she tugged the bow open. "You didn't!" she gasped, peeling back layers of tissue. "Oh, you did!" Brittany beamed. "Alaskan cruise, first class, balcony suite." "Oh, honey, I've always wanted to see a glacier up close. Donnie, did you know about this?" Dawn, nursing a Bloody Mary, gave a sheepish shrug. "Britt planned the whole thing." Deborah reached over and squeezed Brittany's hand. "You are such a giver. I always say that about you." Carolyn smiled faintly, folding her napkin in her lap. She already knew the rhythm, the performance, the part where the camera never really pans her direction. Brittany turned next to Carolyn as if only just remembering. "Yours is smaller, but it's fun." She handed over a plain white envelope with Mom scribbled on the front in pink gel pen. Inside was a single $20 scratch-off ticket. Neon orange. The kind you see on gas station counters between beef jerky and nicotine gum. "You always say you don't want me spending money on you," Brittany said with a tight smile. "You like simple things." Carolyn chuckled softly. "I do." But her heart had gone quiet. Across the table, Don cleared his throat. "Lottery's up to like 100 million, I think." Deborah winked. "Now that's a gift that pays back." They all laughed. Carolyn forced a grin, turning the ticket over in her hands. The back was sticky. The rest of brunch passed in a blur of eggs, Benedict and passive compliments. Brittany talked about renovations to their upstairs bath. Deborah recounted a Pilates instructor scandal at her country club. No one asked Carolyn about her week, her garden, or the book she was reading. After cake, she offered to help with dishes. Brittany waved her off. "The cleaning lady comes tomorrow." Outside, the sun had broken through the pine trees, casting long shadows across the neatly manicured lawn. Carolyn walked to her car alone. No one followed to say goodbye. Her old Subaru groaned as it turned over, the seat warmer slow to kick in. She tossed her handbag into the passenger seat, then paused, pulling the scratch off from her cardigan pocket. It sat in her hand like an inside joke she didn't quite understand. Back home, the cabin smelled like cedar and lemon oil. The wind moved through the chimes on the porch. Carolyn dropped her keys in the bowl near the door and set the ticket on the kitchen counter beside a bowl of ripening pears. She stood for a long moment, just looking at it. Then she walked away. The kettle hissed to life as she lit the stove. Her cat, Maynard, hopped onto the windowsill and yawned. She poured a mug of chamomile, sat down in her reading chair, and opened her latest mystery novel. but she wasn't reading. Her eyes kept drifting to the counter where that single orange rectangle caught the light from the window. Outside, the wind picked up. A tree branch scratched gently against the pane. And inside, in the silence of her modest, cozy home, Carolyn suddenly whispered aloud, "Simple things." Her voice carried no bitterness, but it wasn't gratitude either. It was something else entirely. It started with a sigh. Carolyn had gone into the kitchen to peel a pear. The sun had risen fully now, slanting through the trees, casting gold stripes across her countertops. Maynard sat upright on the window ledge, tail flicking. The scratch-off still sat where she left it, untouched, glaringly orange against the butcher block wood. She hesitated, then reached for it with the same resigned curiosity she might apply to a newspaper horoscope. She grabbed an old mechanical pencil from the drawer, its eraser worn flat, and began scratching. One box, then another, then another. Her hand stopped. She stared, then carefully, calmly, scratched the rest of the card. Her breath shortened. She blinked twice. The numbers lined up perfectly. All 5. Match all numbers, the card read. Win jackpot. Carolyn looked again, slower this time. Her pulse had started to climb, but her body stayed still. She turned the card over and read the instructions. Then she walked to the drawer, pulled out her reading glasses, and read them again. She carried the card into the living room, opened her laptop, and typed the lottery website into the search bar like she was entering a confession. She found the game. Neon Millionaire. Top prize, $120 million, only one winner. Eyes wide now, she looked back at the ticket. It was hers. It was real. Carolyn sat very still for what felt like a full minute, not moving, not blinking. A hot tear pricked the corner of her left eye, then stopped halfway down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. She didn't smile either. Instead, she reached for her phone. No, not to call anyone. She pulled up her weather app, forecast, 72 and sunny, and grabbed her keys. The gas station sat just off the main drag, tucked between a tire center and a shuttered video rental store with a cracked marquee sign. She parked beside the propane cage and walked in, the bell above the door jingling as if nothing about her life had changed. The place smelled like fryer oil and pine-scented air freshener. The clerk at the counter was young, maybe 19, with bleach-tipped hair and a name tag that read, Chase. He glanced up from his phone. Hey. Carolyn smiled faintly and wandered to the back, pretending to browse the refrigerators. When she circled back around, Chase spoke again, louder this time. You play today? She blinked. Sorry? The scratch-offs. Big winner came from this store, like big. News said it was the only one sold here yesterday. Someone hit the jackpot. Carolyn tilted her head slightly, feigning curiosity. That's so. He nodded. Corporate called this morning. They're sending a rep to install one of those Millionaire Made Here posters. She looked at the rows of tickets, lined up like candy. What are the odds? Chase snorted. Like 1 in 100 million, but someone got it. He grinned. We think it's the guy who drives the Snapple truck. Carolyn laughed. Genuinely for once, she bought a Diet Coke, paid cash, and walked out with the receipt still in her hand. Back in her car, she cracked open the soda and took a sip. The bubbles stung her throat. The moment felt too quiet, too absurd, like she'd stepped through a sliding door into someone else's life. She looked out across the cracked parking lot, watching a man load bags of charcoal into his trunk. Another woman argued with a toddler by the vending machines. Life, moving along, clueless. Her phone buzzed with a text. Brittany. Hey, forgot to send pics of the cruise reveal. Deborah's face was priceless. Carolyn stared at the screen. She didn't reply. She turned off the car, the engine ticking as it cooled, and sat there in the heat, holding the winning ticket in her hand like it might combust if she looked away. The world felt different now. Not louder, just sharper. More hers. She slid the ticket back into its envelope and tucked it deep into her glove box, beneath expired registration slips and an old ice scraper. No one needed to know. Not yet. She wasn't done thinking. The state lottery office in Salem looked more like a DMV than a vault for life-changing fortune. Beige walls, worn carpet, fluorescent lights that hummed faintly. Nothing about it screamed $120 million. Carolyn sat in a windowless waiting room, hands folded neatly over her purse. She'd driven 2.5 hours without music, just the low hum of the tires on asphalt and the tick of her turn signal. No one knew where she was. She hadn't told Marla, hadn't even told Maynard, who now had enough funds to be put through college, twice. A heavy door opened with a click. A woman in a navy blazer stepped out, holding a clipboard. Ms. Holt? Carolyn stood, her cardigan too warm for the building's stale air. I'm Haley Brooks, the woman said, shaking her hand firmly. Senior payout officer. Come on back. You're in good hands. Carolyn followed her through a narrow corridor lined with posters of grinning couples and confetti. A teenage boy in one looked like he'd just been told he could skip finals forever. Carolyn couldn't relate to any of them. Inside the small office, everything was immaculate. Mahogany desk, chrome pen holder, a discreet security camera mounted in the corner like a ceiling mole. Haley gestured to a leather chair. First, congratulations. Second, let's make this painless. She opened a manila folder and began the formal checklist. You're here to claim a prize from a Neon Millionaire scratch-off purchased at Petromart number 2137 in Bend, Oregon. Yes, Carolyn said, voice steady. Do you have the original ticket? Carolyn handed it over. Haley examined it under a blacklight scanner, then again under a magnifier. Authentic, untampered. Congratulations, Ms. Holt. You've won $120 million. Carolyn gave a small nod, like she'd just been informed her library books were overdue. Haley continued, efficient and exacting. You have two choices, lump sum or annuity. Most go with the lump sum. After taxes, that's roughly $72.4 million. I'd like to claim it through a trust, Carolyn said quietly. Haley looked up, surprised. You're already thinking ahead. Good. I want to stay private. No press, no photos, no one knows. Haley tapped her pen against the folder. We can work with that. Oregon allows anonymity if the prize is claimed via legal trust. We'll need documentation from your attorney and a name for the trust. Carolyn paused. C. Dawson Legacy Trust. Haley raised an eyebrow. Any significance? Just a name, Carolyn said, though the initials were her late husband's. He'd always said she was the quiet backbone of every room. We'll set you up with a temporary identity and filing address for all communications, Haley said. Security will be briefed. No one outside this office will have your name. And the money? It'll be wired to the trust account once the legal paperwork clears, usually within 10 business days. We'll set up a call with your financial advisor to go over protection plans, tax structures, charitable giving, whatever you need. Haley reached into a drawer and handed her a slim black folder. Inside was a checklist, a non-disclosure form, and a contact sheet. At the bottom, no press release circled in red. This stays airtight, Haley said. People will speculate. They always do. But unless you tell someone, your name won't leave this building. Carolyn stood slowly, folder in hand. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Haley smiled. Enjoy it. Most people walk out of here overwhelmed or terrified. You seem resolved. Carolyn turned to the door. Maybe I've just been invisible long enough to know how to disappear on purpose. Outside, the air was warmer than she expected. She took off her cardigan and walked slowly toward the parking lot. The folder was clutched tightly under her arm. Across the way, a landscaping crew trimmed hedges near the sidewalk. Birds chirped in the ash trees overhead. Ordinary things, still in motion. But inside her, something tectonic had shifted. Carolyn reached her car, set the folder on the passenger seat, and stared at it. It didn't feel like she'd claimed something. It felt like she'd taken it back. Marla's office didn't look like a financial firm. It looked like a private library with espresso machines, deep walnut shelves, Art Deco sconces, an antique globe bar tucked in the corner. Behind her glass desk, Marla Santos wore a navy-sheath dress and tortoise-shell glasses, her silver-streaked hair pulled back into a low, no-nonsense bun. The only visible screen in the room was a black tablet folded neatly beside a fountain pen. Carolyn stepped inside, clutching the folder from the lottery office. Marla stood. "Jesus, Carolyn, you look like someone just told you your cat inherited France." "I need you to close the door," Carolyn said. Marla blinked once, then did as asked. She turned the deadbolt with a soft click. Carolyn set the folder on the desk and slid it across. Marla opened it. Read the cover page. Then looked up, deadpan. "Okay," she said, reaching for her glasses. "Tell me what the hell you did." 30 minutes later, the espresso had gone cold. Marla leaned back in her leather chair, both hands behind her head, smiling like a woman who just won a chess game she hadn't realized she was playing. "You realize you're now richer than most of the people Brittany tries to suck up to at the HOA. Carolyn took a slow breath. "I realize a lot of things." Marla tapped a pen against her chin. "So you want stealth wealth. No spending sprees, no Teslas, no mountain of Chanel boxes on your doorstep." "I want options," Carolyn said. "I want control. And I don't want Brittany, Deborah, or anyone else treating me like a walking bank." Marla grinned. "Now that's the Carolyn I remember." "Okay. First, we set up a high-security trust. C. Dawson Legacy Trust will own everything. Then we create a shell LLC that acts as the operating entity for any investments or property purchases. That'll let you move without your name attached to anything." Carolyn nodded. "And we start today." Marla was already typing on her tablet. "I've got 3 paralegals in the building who think NDAs are a lifestyle choice. They'll draw up the shell company paperwork this afternoon." Carolyn reached into her handbag and pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it over the desk. Marla opened it and paused. Inside was a crisp real estate flyer. Lot 19, Bend Pines Estates, 3.2 acres, zoned for residential development, 1.57 menu. Marla looked up. "This is next to Brittany's street." Carolyn's expression didn't change. 3 doors down. Empty land? Unbuilt. Private sale. I already called the broker. They're eager to close." Marla gave a short laugh. "You're dangerous when you're quiet." "Good." Marla pushed her glasses higher. "So what's the play? You going to build a mansion, fly helicopters over the block, keep a tiger in the backyard?" "I haven't decided yet," Carolyn said calmly. "Maybe a greenhouse. Maybe something bigger." "You've never even raised your voice to that girl," Marla said, half admiring, half astonished. "And now you're buying land beside her like a Bond villain with good credit." Carolyn's eyes flicked toward the window, where a breeze rustled the ferns outside. "She gave me a scratch ticket," she said, voice quiet, "and told me I liked simple things." Marla's smile turned razor sharp. "Ready to play long?" Carolyn looked back at her, a calm steel in her gaze. "Let's see," she said. "Who values simple things now?" Later, alone in her car, Carolyn pulled up the photo of the empty lot on her phone. It was wild and ragged, pines scattered unevenly across soft hills. You could barely see the view beyond the tree line, but she knew. She'd seen it from Brittany's upstairs guest bath, mint bachelor, framed like a postcard. She didn't know what she'd build yet. That wasn't the point. The point was, no one saw her coming. The lawyer wore red loafers and an expression that never blinked. His office sat inside a converted craftsman, all warm wood beams and mid-century chairs meant to put clients at ease. Carolyn wasn't looking for ease. She was looking for closure. She handed him a single, neatly printed document. "This is the final version," she said. He scanned the first page, brow rising slightly. "Removing your only child from your will is a significant step." "I'm aware." She hasn't contested it? She doesn't know. He gave her a long look, then nodded. "C. Dawson Legacy Trust will assume full ownership of your estate. Disbursements to the shelters outlined here, excellent choices by the way, will begin upon your passing. Executor listed as Marla Santos. And no residual beneficiaries?" "None," Carolyn confirmed. He clicked his pen twice. "If you're ever uncertain—" "I'm not." He signed. She initialed. The notary stamped. Just like that, Brittany Connors was erased from her mother's future. The cabin sat on the eastern edge of Elkwater Lake, tucked behind a thin veil of trees, the gravel drive almost invisible from the main road. A for sale by owner sign had been staked out front for 6 months. Carolyn made a full cash offer that morning. No haggling, no agents. The seller, a retired doctor moving to Scottsdale, practically cried as he handed over the keys. "I always thought it'd go to someone who needed peace." "I do," Carolyn said softly. The house itself was a craftsman's dream. Knotty pine walls, a 2-story stone fireplace, wraparound deck, and lake views from every window. Birds nested in the gutters. The air smelled like firewood and damp moss. She walked through it slowly, barefoot, touched every beam, ran her hand along the stair banister, turned on every faucet. It wasn't luxury by Brittany's standards, no quartz countertops or imported marble, but it was hers. Undeniably, wholly hers. On the mailbox, she'd already replaced the nameplate, C. Dawson Holdings. Just a whisper of a name, something that could slide through paperwork without catching attention. She unpacked a single overnight bag and a small tin of cookies Marla had pressed into her hands earlier that day. "I don't want you going hungry while you torch your legacy," she'd teased. Carolyn had only smiled. That night, she lit the fireplace with matches, the old-fashioned way. No remote control, no buttons. She sat cross-legged on the floor with a wool blanket around her shoulders, a mug of tea warming her palms. The only sound was the fire crackling and a loon calling from the lake. Above her, framed in the tall window, Mint Bachelor loomed like a quiet guardian, snow still clinging to its ridges. She thought about Brittany, not with hate, not even anger, just clarity. Brittany wouldn't notice the will was changed, not until it was too late. That was the thing about entitlement. It didn't look backward. It assumed forward motion, inheritance as certainty. Carolyn had spent years making excuses for her daughter, blaming herself for the distance, for raising someone who couldn't see value in anything unshiny. But now the line was drawn. She pulled out her phone and opened a new email draft to Marla. Subject: Final confirmations. Confirm when all shelter disbursements are scheduled. Let's prep for Phase 2. See, she hit send, then leaned back and closed her eyes. The heat from the fire kissed her cheeks. Her breathing slowed. Outside, the moon hung low, its reflection shimmering across the lake like a whispered promise. She didn't feel vindictive. She felt still, steady. For the first time in a very long time, Carolyn Holt felt free. The patio table gleamed under the late morning sun, a spread of mimosas, almond croissants, and just enough avocado toast to pretend they weren't there to gossip. Brittany sat front and center, oversized sunglasses perched on her head like a tiara, holding court over her brunch circle. She's still in that old cabin, she said, laughing a little too loudly. I mean, we practically support her at this point. Dawn helps with her taxes, and I'm the one who picks up her prescriptions. But you know how she is? Proud. The women around her, school board moms, realtors, a lifestyle blogger with 14K followers, nodded in practiced sympathy. She should be grateful, one offered. Brittany sighed and sipped her mimosa. She is, in her own way. She just doesn't show it. Across town, in an office suite with no signage, a wire transfer completed. $250,000 routed from the C. Dawson Foundation to West Pines Elementary School, where Brittany's kids attended, and where budget cuts had gutted the arts program the year prior. Carolyn never walked the school halls. She didn't need to. She'd read the district's financials, reviewed every line item, and made her decision before breakfast. She didn't want a plaque. She didn't want a meeting. She wanted violins back in the classroom, paintbrushes in little hands, and heating vents that worked through December. The school's principal received the notice with stunned silence. The email simply read, Grant recipient, West Pines Elementary School. From the C. Dawson Foundation, unrestricted funds. Use for immediate need. No address. No contact number. Just impact. 2 days later, the local news station ran a segment. An anonymous donor has gifted West Pines Elementary $250,000, reviving critical art and enrichment programs cut after last year's budget shortfall. The check, issued through the C. Dawson Foundation, marks one of the largest single donations to a public school in Deschutes County this year. They showed footage of paint-splattered children laughing beside easels. One girl twirled in a handmade ballet costume made of crepe paper and tulle. The clip ended with the anchor saying, "Still no word on who the mysterious donor might be." Brittany watched it on her phone while waiting in the school pickup line, brow furrowed. Who would donate to this dump? She muttered to herself. Nobody gives money to elementary schools unless they want something. Dawn, in the driver's seat, shrugged. Maybe a grandparent? A rich alum? From an elementary school? She scrolled again, landing on a still frame of the oversized check with the foundation's name. C. Dawson Foundation. She stared at it. Something about it scratched at the back of her brain. C. Dawson, she repeated under her breath. Does that sound familiar to you? Not really, Dawn said. Why? She shook her head. Nothing. Just weird. Behind them, a whistle blew and kids began pouring out of the building, coats half-zipped, faces bright with that late autumn excitement that smelled like pumpkin soap and wood smoke. Their youngest, Avery, bounded into the back seat holding a flyer for a new after-school art club. We get to make puppets, she shouted. Miss Heller says we're gonna build a stage and everything. Brittany blinked. They haven't had after-school clubs since... Dawn smiled. Since the budget cuts. That evening, Carolyn took the long way home from Elkwater Lake. She turned down Brittany's street, not to stop, just to pass through. Her Subaru crawled along the curb, invisible behind tinted windows and an out-of-state plate. She slowed near the elementary school. A group of kids played tag under the fading glow of the street lamps. Someone had painted a new mural on the side of the gym, sunflowers and handprints, with a quote stenciled beneath it. Art speaks where words are unable to explain. She didn't need to get out of the car. She didn't need applause or recognition. She just watched, listened. A laugh rang out. Avery's, unmistakable even across the parking lot. Carolyn's mouth twitched into a genuine, quiet smile. Not performative, not polite. Real. The knock came just after noon. Carolyn had been kneading dough in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, flour dusting her forearms like ash. The scent of rosemary and yeast drifted through the open windows, carried on the September breeze. She paused, wiped her hands on a dish towel, and walked barefoot to the front door. When she opened it, Brittany stood there. Oversized sunglasses, lip gloss, designer handbag slung over her shoulder like a status badge. "Well," Brittany said, surveying the porch with a smile too bright to be real. "Still smells like a bread commercial in here. That's your thing, huh?" Carolyn stepped aside without a word. Brittany stepped in, her heels clicking against the old hardwood like they didn't quite belong there. Her eyes scanned the living room, the stacked books, the worn armchair, the quilt draped over the couch. "God, it's like walking into a Cracker Barrel gift shop," she said, laughing. "You know, in a cute way." Carolyn raised an eyebrow. "You drove all the way here for interior critiques?" Brittany's smile faltered. "No, no. Just thought it'd been a while since we talked. Face to face." Carolyn didn't offer tea, didn't sit. She stood across from her daughter, hands folded, waiting. Brittany hesitated, then launched. "So, Deborah's having a rough time again. Another round of treatments, and the insurance deductible reset. Dawn's been covering most of it, but we've got this chunk we didn't see coming. About 10,000. Carolyn said nothing. "I mean, we'll figure it out," Brittany added quickly, brushing a hand through her hair. "We always do. But I thought, you know, since you've been doing okay, maybe you could float us the money. Just a short-term thing." Carolyn tilted her head. "Doing okay?" "Well, yeah. You've got the cabin, and the Subaru's still running, right?" Brittany gestured vaguely at the window. "And you don't really go anywhere. No big bills. I mean, you must have something stashed away." Carolyn's smile was mild. "All I got was a lottery ticket, remember?" Brittany laughed, tight and short. "Right, that scratch-off. God, was that 2 Mother's Days ago?" "Can't believe I wasted $20 on that thing." Carolyn's voice didn't change. "So you're saying I didn't win anything?" Brittany rolled her eyes. "Obviously. If you had, I wouldn't be standing here asking." Carolyn chuckled softly. "Exactly," she said. There was a long silence. Brittany shifted on her feet. "So, is that a no?" Carolyn walked back into the kitchen, rinsed her hands, and returned with a tray of rising dough. She gently pressed it into a cast-iron pan, shaping it with the calm precision of someone who wasn't rushing. Who never rushed anymore. "I don't think I'm the right person to ask," she said evenly. Brittany watched her, lips parting slightly. There was confusion in her face, a flicker of something else too. Humiliation, maybe. The kind that burns before it settles into resentment. "You'd really let your own daughter struggle," she said, the sugary tone gone. "Over 10 grand?" Carolyn didn't look up. "You'd be surprised what people let happen when they think someone's not worth much." Brittany stepped back, clearly stung, reaching for her bag. "Wow. Okay. Message received." She turned, hand on the doorknob. Just before she walked out, Carolyn added, "How's Deborah feeling?" Brittany didn't turn around. "Like she deserves better." The door closed. Later that evening, Carolyn stood on her back porch, the rosemary focaccia cooling on the counter behind her. A hawk circled above the lake, riding the last of the afternoon thermals. She sipped her tea slowly, the air cool against her face. She wasn't angry, not even disappointed. What she felt was something sturdier. Like the final brick laid in a long overdue boundary, the kind no one could borrow their way across. The first truck rolled up the gravel drive just after sunrise. Carolyn stood on the porch, coffee steaming in her mug, watching the contractors unload toolboxes and lumber with a rhythm that felt both foreign and thrilling. She wore worn jeans, a flannel shirt, and the kind of soft-soled boots meant for mud and business. The lake glistened behind her, quiet and loyal. The renovations had begun. The cabin didn't vanish. It evolved. What had once been a solitary escape was expanding into something transformative. Carolyn worked with a female architect out of Eugene who specialized in wellness retreats. Every corner of the new design whispered calm, floor-to-ceiling windows, meditation pavilions tucked into the tree line, organic landscaping that embraced the wilderness instead of taming it. But the heart of the project, what made it hers, was the people. She hired locally, but carefully. Every staff member was a single mother. Some had fled bad marriages, some were still finding their footing, but all of them were given health benefits, paid training, and wages double the county average. No under the table, no shortcuts. Real pay, real futures. Carolyn had never run a business before, but she knew how to build a system that honored people. The name came to her while staring at the lake one evening, watching the moon reflect across the water in silver streaks. The Holt Haven. Her late husband, Leonard Holt, had loved calm water and clean design. It felt like bringing him back, but on her terms. Within 6 months, the retreat center was fully operational. Massage therapy, forest bathing, nutritional workshops, and lakefront journaling decks that looked like something out of Architectural Digest. Word spread quickly, but not through press or influencers. No Instagram campaigns. Just quiet, earned reputation. The Holt Haven became a whispered favorite among women looking to breathe again. Booked out 6 months in advance, and then, naturally, Deborah tried to reserve a weekend. The front desk manager forwarded the email to Carolyn. Reservation request? Name, Deborah Connors. Requested dates: October 14-16 notes. Referral from someone in my women's leadership circle. I'd love a king suite and deep tissue massage if you have room. XO. Deborah Carolyn stared at the screen. The irony was too thick to be sad. She clicked deny, typed one note into the system, fully booked through March, and closed her laptop. 2 days later, another message arrived. This time, from Brittany. Subject: Is this yours? Hey Mom, I saw this place on a wellness blog I follow, and the building looked so much like your old cabin. But fancy. The Holt Haven? Is that you? If it is, it's incredible. Like, jaw on the floor beautiful. XO. Britt Carolyn didn't reply. Not because she was being cruel, because she didn't need to anymore. That evening, as twilight poured lavender shadows across the trees, she walked the stone path to one of the newly built journaling decks, barefoot, her tea warming her palms. Down the slope, she could hear laughter. Staff prepping for a welcome dinner. One of the new hires, Kelly, was teaching the others how to make herb-infused lemonade for the guests. Carolyn sat on a cushion, the breeze curling her silver hair at the ends. She wasn't building this place for vengeance. She was building it to prove something that never got the chance to bloom inside her own daughter. That women who are overlooked are often the ones worth betting on. The news broke on a Monday morning. Quiet at first, like a hairline crack no one noticed until it split the whole foundation. Local charity board member accused of personal use of funds. The subheader was worse. Cruise payment linked to shared nonprofit account. Internal investigation pending. The article didn't name Deborah outright, but the breadcrumbs weren't subtle. A high-profile board member from Bend. A charity co-chaired by her son. A timeline that matched the same Alaskan cruise she'd bragged about on Facebook, right down to the spa upgrade and champagne welcome basket. By noon, the comments were brutal. Imagine stealing from cancer patients to sip mimosas in a hot tub. She wore fur to a fundraising gala. What did we expect? This is why people don't trust nonprofits. Brittany tried to run damage control in real time. She pulled her Instagram offline for maintenance, took down 2 videos featuring Deborah, and posted a vague story with a soft-filtered sunrise and the caption, "Grateful for new beginnings, detoxing from toxicity, rebuilding with love." But the algorithm didn't buy it. Her engagement numbers tanked. Partnership emails slowed. A skincare company dropped her mid-campaign. And when she finally put her account back up, her newest post, an oat milk smoothie in a reclaimed mason jar, barely hit 300 likes. Her following, once rabid for her lifestyle tips and real talk reels, had gone cold. Across the country, in the back pages of Cedar and Sage, a nationally syndicated wellness magazine with a devoted upper-middle-class female readership, a full-page ad quietly ran. The Holt Haven, a refuge for the ones who give without being seen. Founded by a former librarian who built legacy from silence. There was no address, no photo of Carolyn, just a dreamy image of the retreat's main lodge, aglow at dusk, and a quote pulled from an early guest's testimonial. "This place doesn't fix you. It reminds you you were never broken." Carolyn had paid cash for the ad. She'd declined a profile feature. No interviews, no marketing push. But she knew exactly what audience the magazine reached. She knew who would see it. Brittany did, of course. She was scrolling through the issue in the waiting room of a Botox med spa, flipping lazily until her fingers froze mid-turn. There it was. Page 87. Her eyes widened as she took in the image. She knew that silhouette, the A-frame roofline, the way the sun caught the edge of the lake. Her thumb tapped the corner of the page like she could zoom in on print. She read the blurb 3 times, founded by a former librarian. The realization didn't hit her all at once. It rolled in like fog, thick, slow, inevitable. She opened her phone, scrolled back to the email she'd sent Carolyn about the Holt Haven. Still no reply. Still red. Then she pulled up the original lottery ticket post from 2 years ago. The one she'd captioned, "Simple Gifts for a Simple Soul." It had over 100 comments. She'd thought she was being cute. Gracious. She felt sick. Carolyn was folding linens in one of the guest suites when her phone rang. The screen lit up. Brittany. She considered not answering, then tapped accept and held it to her ear. For a moment there was only breathing. Then Brittany spoke. Small, almost hoarse. "Is this all you?" Carolyn didn't answer right away. She smoothed the corner of the fitted sheet, tucking it perfectly into the mattress seam. Everything had its place. "I don't understand," Brittany continued. Why wouldn't you say something?" Outside, the wind picked up. Chimes danced faintly on the deck railing. Carolyn finally said, "Because you never asked who I was, only what I had." There was a long pause on the line. Carolyn imagined her daughter sitting somewhere sleek and white, mascara probably smudged, hands shaking in a way that wasn't performative for once. "I thought," Brittany began, but didn't finish the sentence. "I know what you thought," Carolyn said gently. The invitation came in thick cream cardstock, embossed in gold, with a handwritten note tucked inside. "We would be honored if you'd consider joining the board. Your work through the C. Dawson Foundation speaks for itself." Lydia Green, Director, Deschutes Women's Shelter Network. Carolyn sat at her kitchen table, sun pouring through the window, a cinnamon scone cooling beside her tea. She ran her fingers over the card once, then set it down with care, like it might bruise if she pressed too hard. 2 weeks later, a second invitation arrived from a food insecurity nonprofit in Bend. Same tone, same handwritten sincerity. No flattery, just respect. She accepted both. Her foundation, now fully staffed and quietly powerful, launched a new initiative that fall, the Marion Holt Scholars Program, a full-ride college scholarship for young women in Oregon pursuing education degrees. Named for Carolyn's mother, a first-grade teacher who'd never gone to college herself, but spent 35 years convincing other people's daughters they could. The launch was planned without fanfare. Just a short press release and a mention in the Oregonian. But the gala, hosted by the Deschutes Women's Shelter, would be something different. A celebration of legacy, a fundraiser, and, without Brittany knowing, the first event she and her mother would attend together in over a year. Brittany had been invited by a friend of a friend, trying to crawl back into community grace. She accepted, hoping to be seen, to be relevant again. The ballroom shimmered in deep emerald and candlelight, with warm jazz playing beneath the low hum of wine glasses and evening gowns. The crowd was elegant but not pretentious. Nonprofit leaders, local women in power, and the quiet donors who kept them afloat. Carolyn arrived early, escorted by one of her staff. Her dress was midnight blue, velvet, with sleeves that kissed her wrists and a neckline that made her posture straighten without effort. Her hair was swept up in a soft twist, her only jewelry a thin gold chain with her husband's wedding band looped through. She didn't look like money. She looked like presence. Brittany arrived an hour later, wearing rented silk and a forced smile. She floated through the crowd, hoping to be noticed, until her eyes landed on the program. Keynote speaker, Carolyn Holt. Scholarship founder, C. Dawson Foundation board member, DWSN, Nourish Central Oregon. She froze. Across the room, Carolyn stood near the stage, laughing gently at something a young volunteer had said. A glass of sparkling water in hand, composed, whole. Brittany walked up slowly, almost like approaching a stranger. Carolyn turned before she spoke, of course she did, and met her daughter's eyes without surprise or warmth, just readiness. Brittany hesitated. "Why didn't you tell me?" Carolyn didn't blink. "You told me not to expect much." The answer landed between them like glass. Brittany opened her mouth, then closed it. There were people around. Donors. Waitstaff. Women in suits with clipboards. She felt small. Not in stature, but in shape. Like she took up less space in the room than she used to. Carolyn stepped past her toward the stage as the lights dimmed, her presence cutting through the noise with grace earned, not given. Brittany turned and watched her walk away, but this time, she didn't follow. She just stood there. Carolyn stood at the podium, scanning the sea of faces lit in soft amber light. "I want to thank you," she said, her voice smooth and steady. "Not just for showing up tonight, but for building what others forget to imagine. A world where women can start again. Quietly, powerfully." The room applauded. Genuine, sustained. In the back, Brittany clapped too, but her hands stung. It started as whispers. Brittany, slipping it into brunches and book clubs like a passing comment, casual and controlled. "I mean, my mom? She just vanished. Doesn't even visit the kids anymore. She's not the woman she used to be. I don't even recognize her. She got all this money, somehow, and left her family behind." In curated circles, Brittany rebranded herself as the abandoned daughter, the one who'd tried, the one who loved hard. She wrapped the narrative in linen blend humility and sips of kombucha, crafting a portrait of a woman burdened by a cold, unreachable mother who chose money over connection. But Carolyn was already ahead of her. The blog launched without announcement or fanfare. Just a minimalist website, a pale gray background, black serif font. No comment section, no author photo, no bio. Its title, The Invisible Mother, Reflections on Being Quiet in a Loud Family. Each entry was short, clean, raw, without ever being messy. Carolyn wrote about small indignities, being talked over in conversations, having her birthday forgotten, being handed the check at group dinners while others scrolled their phones. There was no anger in her tone, only observation, precision. Her voice cut gently. In one piece, she described being thanked for keeping things simple, while simultaneously being erased from the family vacation photo because she wasn't really in the mood that day. In another, she described wrapping her own Christmas gifts with tissue paper she'd ironed flat from the year before. The posts began circulating quietly in women's Facebook groups, then Reddit, then TikTok, where younger women read excerpts aloud, voices trembling. A quote from the third entry made its way onto canvas wall prints and water bottles within a week. Sometimes the simplest gifts reveal the deepest truths. The blog exploded. Carolyn, still anonymous, received messages through the site's contact form. Dozens, then hundreds. Women wrote to say, "That was me. I didn't even realize I'd disappeared until I read your words. Thank you for showing us we're not crazy." A journalist from The Atlantic requested an interview. Carolyn declined, sending a short reply from a secure email. The stories matter more than the storyteller. Of course, not everyone loved it. One day, a particularly bitter comment appeared beneath a screenshot of Carolyn's blog quote posted by a trauma therapist on Instagram. The commenter's username? A. Deborah Connors 5. Her message was simple. Some of us didn't have the luxury of disappearing. Try raising real kids in the real world. This is just another excuse for emotional neglect disguised as boundaries. Within an hour, the replies flooded in. Did you even read the post? Yikes. Someone's feeling called out. Lady, maybe log off and go apologize to your daughter-in-law. The therapist who'd shared the post responded last. Sounds like you're still centering yourself in someone else's story. That's kind of the whole point. Deborah deleted her comment, but not before screenshots went viral. Carolyn never acknowledged it publicly. She didn't need to. The next post on The Invisible Mother went up quietly 3 days later. It read, in full, "You can tell the story without naming the villain. They always find themselves anyway." I am. Meanwhile, Brittany watched from the sidelines. She hadn't said anything about the blog publicly, not yet. But she saw the way people paused when she walked into meetings now. The way old friends tilted their heads, suddenly unsure how to look at her. She caught her reflection one afternoon, standing in line at Whole Foods, holding a protein bar and 2 kombucha bottles, and realized with a start that her posture looked guarded, not graceful, not effortless, careful. She pulled out her phone, typed "The Invisible Mother" into Google, stared at the top result. She clicked, scrolled, read 3 entries in a row, then closed the tab, too fast, like she'd touched a hot stove. The request came through the encrypted contact form. It was simple, direct. We believe your voice matters. Just one interview. Anonymous. Audio only. No pressure. Ellie Tran, senior writer. The Violet Ledger. Carolyn had seen Ellie's work. Gentle but unsparing. A journalist who handled truth like porcelain, with care, not fear. She waited 2 days before replying, then agreed. They recorded the interview over Zoom, video off. Voice modulated. Carolyn spoke through a secure line, her tone steady and deliberate. Ellie didn't rush her. They talked for over an hour. About inheritance and invisibility. About what it meant to give endlessly and be thanked with scraps. About how erasure often looked polite. Clean napkins, unspoken assumptions, empty gestures wrapped in glitter. She never mentioned her name. Never mentioned Brittany. But the truth was there, in the spaces between the words. When the article went live 2 weeks later, the title alone made headlines, "The Woman Who Turned One Ticket into a Movement." It spread fast, picked up by NPR, then The Cut, then Good Morning America. The piece described a woman who won a massive lottery but used her anonymity to launch something greater. A quiet campaign of healing, equity, and overdue power. It included quotes from the Invisible Mother and snippets from the interview. You learn not to scream when silence becomes your inheritance. I didn't want revenge. I wanted reconstruction. Love isn't loud, but disrespect usually is. By morning, donations to the C. Dawson Foundation tripled. Marla's phone lit up non-stop with fund managers, press, and prospective partners. She silenced every call and forwarded Carolyn a screenshot of the ledger's front page with a single text. Marla, you're a legend, and she doesn't even know it. Carolyn sat in her garden, pruning back the lavender bushes, dirt under her nails. A sun hat slanted low across her brow. She smiled, slow and real. Not for the fame, for the clarity. Brittany, meanwhile, stared at her phone like it had betrayed her. She'd just finished reading the article over her morning matcha when she noticed the pull quote from the Invisible Mother. She cross-referenced the byline, checked the timestamps, crossed her arms and read it again. Slower this time. There was no name, but the pattern was obvious now. The phrases, the tone, the precision, the way it struck a nerve she hadn't known was still exposed. She tried to laugh, but it came out clipped. Then she texted Carolyn. Brittany, this is a weird coincidence. That anonymous lady sounds exactly like you. Is it? She waited an hour, then 2. No reply. She texted again. Brittany, good for her, if it's not you. Just reminds me of some of the stuff you used to say. Anyway, hope you're well. Still no reply. That night, Carolyn met Marla in her office to finalize paperwork for a new endowment. They sat side by side, wine glasses sweating on coasters, legal folders open across the desk like chapters in a book. Are you going to tell her? Marla asked, not looking up. No, Carolyn said. That would make it about her. Marla leaned back in her chair, swirling her glass. You're more merciful than I would be. I'm not trying to be merciful, Carolyn replied. I'm trying to be free. She pulled a fresh envelope from her bag. The seal wasn't broken. Her new will, finalized. Carolyn slid it across the desk. Marla tapped it once with her knuckle and nodded. The contents? Everything to the foundation. Holt Haven protected in perpetuity. Scholarships locked in. No residual beneficiaries. Legacy, fully rerouted. Marla lifted her glass. To clean slates. Carolyn touched hers to it gently. To earned ones. Carolyn didn't expect the knock. It was nearly dusk, the last gold of the day sliding through the trees, casting latticework shadows on the porch. She'd been clipping mint from the garden when she heard it. 3 taps. Uncertain, but persistent. She opened the door to find Brittany standing there. No makeup. Hair pulled into a messy knot. A hoodie instead of one of her curated cardigans. Eyes red, shoulders slack. She looked less like the daughter Carolyn knew, and more like the girl she'd once braided pigtails for after a lost spelling bee. Can I come in? Brittany asked softly. Carolyn stepped aside, said nothing. Inside, the cabin felt still. The scent of herbs and wood smoke lingered in the corners. Brittany hovered near the entryway, hands clenched into sleeves. She didn't sit. Not yet. I read every post, she said after a long silence. The blog, the article, the quotes. I know it's you. Carolyn moved to the kitchen counter and poured 2 mugs of hot water, steeping fresh mint leaves into one. She set the second cup down on the table beside a small jar of honey, just in case. Then she finally met her daughter's eyes. Brittany sat, and for a moment, all Carolyn heard was the whistle of the wind pressing against the glass. I didn't get it before, Brittany began. Not really. I don't know. I thought you were just being dramatic, or proud, or trying to punish me. She laughed, bitter and quiet. But the posts, They were like someone had crawled inside my ribcage and wrote what I didn't want to know about myself. Carolyn stayed silent. Still. I wasn't just ungrateful. I was cruel, Brittany said. Dismissive, entitled. I thought I was the generous one, the one giving. But I was taking. Always taking. Her voice cracked. She looked down at her lap. And I was jealous. Of you. Of how calm you were. How you didn't need the spotlight. How people started listening to you anyway. Even when they didn't know your name. She wiped her face with her sleeve, then looked up, raw. I was jealous of your peace. Carolyn nodded, but her face didn't soften. Not in the way Brittany had expected. I used to think, Brittany continued, that all you wanted was to feel included. Appreciated. I didn't realize you were asking to be seen. Like, really seen. She took a long breath. I didn't know how much I took for granted. Carolyn finally spoke. It wasn't what you gave me, she said, voice level. It was what you didn't. Brittany closed her eyes. You wanted me to fix it with a thank you, Carolyn added. After years of acting like I was a burden with a grocery list. Brittany winced. I'm not angry, Carolyn said. I'm finished. Brittany leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice shaking now. I don't want your money. I don't want a second chance at the will. I swear. I want you to know I see it now. I see you now. Carolyn looked out the window toward the lake. The outline of the retreat center glowing in the distance, soft porch lights flickering like embers. I believe that you're sorry, she said, but I don't need your apology to move on. I already have. A pause, long enough to carry weight. Then Carolyn stood, crossed to the bookshelf, and pulled down a small hardcover book with a linen jacket. No title on the front, just a single line embossed in gold. To the women who waited too long to be heard. She handed it to Brittany. Inside was a collection of essays, The Invisible Mother, bound in print. It hadn't hit stores yet. Marla had just overnighted the first batch. Brittany took it like a fragile thing. Her thumb brushed the edge of the dedication page. To anyone who needed proof that silence was never the same thing as weakness. Her voice was a whisper. You're really not coming back, are you? Carolyn's answer was calm. I never left. I just stopped waiting for a seat at your table. The ballroom at Holt Haven shimmered like the surface of the lake outside, lit with soft amber, dressed in linen, and thrumming with quiet reverence. It was the 1-year anniversary of the C. Dawson Foundation, and for the first time since its inception, Carolyn Holt would take the stage as herself. No pen name. No modulated voice. No more quiet. Outside, reporters waited behind velvet rope lines, hushed by the gravity of what this place had become. Inside, the guest list included nonprofit directors, former scholarship recipients, local officials, and women who had rebuilt entire lives from the wages and dignity Holt Haven had given them. In the third row, Brittany sat between two board members. Her dress was understated, her hair pulled back. She didn't wear her usual lashes or gloss, and for once, she hadn't posted a single photo from the event. She was watching. Carolyn stepped onto the stage without cue cards or teleprompter. She wore a sleek navy dress and her mother's locket around her neck, the same one Brittany used to play with in church pews, back when her hands were still small enough to need holding. The room fell into hush. I spent most of my life being told I was lucky to be included, Carolyn began, her voice smooth but unhurried. That my silence made things easier. That gratitude looked like staying in the background. A low murmur of agreement moved through the crowd. But silence doesn't erase you, she continued. It just delays your becoming. She glanced briefly toward Brittany. No emphasis. No pause, just enough acknowledgement to mark history without assigning blame. In this room, she said, are women who were told they weren't worth investing in, who were told to be quiet, polite, manageable. You are not manageable. You are remarkable. The applause came, strong and sustained. A camera crew filmed discreetly from the side, already drafting tomorrow's headline. The invisible turned unstoppable. As the room rose to their feet, Brittany remained seated. Her hands were folded in her lap. Not clapping, not scrolling, just still. Marla leaned in beside her, voice low but unmistakable. She gave you more than money ever could. Brittany looked at her, eyes rimmed but dry. She gave me nothing, she said, then paused, like she knew that wasn't quite right. She gave me a mirror. Up on stage, Carolyn didn't bask in the applause. She stepped back from the mic, nodding in gratitude, and returned to her seat next to Marla as the string quartet resumed softly behind her. Later that evening, the crowd thinned. Dessert plates clinked, and laughter returned to the air like loosened ribbon. Carolyn stood near the terrace, a flute of sparkling cider in her hand, as guests approached one by one to thank her. A scholarship recipient from Portland hugged her. A shelter director gave her a pin engraved with solidarity. Brittany approached last, not for a scene, not for closure, just to stand in the same space. She didn't say anything. Carolyn didn't either. They simply looked at each other for a moment. Two women who had outlived a version of themselves. The air between them wasn't cold. It wasn't warm either. It just was. After Brittany walked away, Marla reappeared at Carolyn's side, swirling the last of her wine. I think she finally understands, she said. Carolyn looked out at the lake, where the reflection of Holt Haven glimmered against the dark. She'll forget again, she said. That's the thing about people. They remember when it hurts. They forget when it heals. Marla raised an eyebrow. So what now? Carolyn tilted her head toward the horizon. I keep building. The garden smelled like late September. Sun-warmed sage, damp earth, and that faint mineral tang of lake water drifting in on the breeze. Carolyn walked the path barefoot, slow and steady, trailing her fingertips along the lavender stalks. Behind her, children's laughter echoed from the crafts tent near the ridge, where Holt Haven's youngest guests painted pine cones and made crowns from fallen leaves. She paused beneath the willow tree. From here, she could see the edge of the water, quiet, blue, and glass flat. The same view she'd once looked at with grief knotted in her chest. The same lake that had watched her reinvent herself piece by piece. She remembered the brunch, the scratch-off ticket, the smile she'd forced, the shame that had wrapped around her like an old damp sweater. She had driven home that day convinced that nothing would ever change. She hadn't known she was already changing. Carolyn closed her eyes for a moment. The wind stirred her hair. In the distance, a wind chime sang low and silver. A soft voice behind her broke the quiet. They just confirmed Phoenix in Minneapolis. She turned to find Marla standing on the stone path, 2 lattes in hand. Her blazer sleeves were pushed up, phone tucked into one pocket. No one wore power the way Marla Santos did, unapologetically, and in pearls. 5 states, Carolyn said, accepting the latte. That's more than I ever pictured. Marla grinned. We're not building a little pond anymore. This is a whole ocean. They walked back toward the lodge together, gravel crunching beneath their feet. As they neared the porch, Marla stopped and reached into her satchel. I brought you something, she said, hot off the press. She handed over a thick paperback book, wrapped in butcher paper and twine. Carolyn unraveled it slowly. The cover was simple, cream with deep navy lettering, The Invisible Mother. Essays on Quiet Power by Carolyn Holt. She ran her palm over the title, then opened the front cover. There, On the blank page opposite the dedication, she picked up a pen and wrote slowly, deliberately, "To anyone who's ever been overlooked, don't stay quiet." She closed the book. Her hands didn't tremble. Back inside, the fire had already been lit in the lodge's great room. Guests lingered over chamomile tea and cocoa in ceramic mugs. Carolyn moved past them all, up the stairs to her private loft, where the windows stretched floor to ceiling and framed the world like a watercolor painting. Mint Bachelor glowed on the horizon, pink and gold and magnificent. She curled into her reading chair with a blanket and her cocoa, steam fogging the edge of the glass as she watched dusk descend. Below, a mother corralled two kids onto the dock for sunset photos. One little girl wore a crown of pine needles and a glittery jacket. The boy beside her held a pine cone in each hand, like treasure. Carolyn smiled. This wasn't the life she'd been given. It was the one she chose, built, not as a correction, but as a creation. Her phone buzzed gently on the side table. A message from Brittany. Just 3 words. Still reading. Still learning. Carolyn let the screen dim. Outside, the mountain blushed deeper as the sun dipped low, scattering color across the lake like spilled jewels. She took a sip of cocoa. She gave me luck. I gave her legacy, just not hers.